Buddhism teaches the value of cultivating higher levels of consciousness. Traditions within Western culture with similar teachings have frequently been quite dualist, setting spirit off against matter, mind against body, etc. How can we best understand and present Buddhism in a way that avoids playing into this strong current of Western conditioning? This is Saramati's question. Yeah. I had been thinking, I think it was last year and the year before, quite a bit about this, but mainly as a result of reading the writings of James Hillman. And what it seems is that in the modern West, just to summarize very, very briefly, we've got ourselves into a situation where we think in terms of body and mind. What Hillman points out is that we've left out psyche. That psyche represents a whole intermediate, very vast range of experience between body and what he calls mind, though he does seem rather to be confused about mind in the ordinary, current sense, and what one might call, using the Platonic and Neoplatonic terminology, nous. So there isn't just body and mind. There's body and soul, to use the different terminology, and spirit. So I think this is what we need to do, to try to make it clear, and in Buddhist terms, that there isn't just body and mind. There's a whole hierarchy of levels and degrees of consciousness in between bodily consciousness and nirvanic consciousness. Hillman speaks very much in terms of the archetypal. There's the school of psychology, though it's much more than that he has founded, is called archetypal psychology. So I think we need to draw people's attention to that archetypal realm, which is also the realm of myth and imagination and so on. So if we can do that, I think it will tend to moderate this sort of body-mind dualism that seems to have come down especially from Descartes. We need to think much more in terms of a vast range of levels of consciousness and being. And certainly in the Pali text especially, there are many descriptions of this vast range. It's all set out quite systematically in the Abhidhamma. And we can move up and down, this range. We aren't confined to this particular level. And in meditation, of course, we do ascend. But we ascend by degrees, by stages. Because there is an element of dualism in a sense in some compartments of Buddhist thought, because there is a form of insight, a form of vipassana called nama, rupa, I think it's vichedana, that is the distinguishing between nama and rupa. The people who teach insight meditation do teach in this particular kind of insight, among others. It's not the only insight, there's a whole series of insights, but this is certainly one of them. But yes, as you say, we do have to be careful, I think, that we don't throw away the baby of a purely spiritual hierarchy when we throw away, and quite rightly throw away, the bathwater of, let's say, a hierarchy of power, which is quite unacceptable from a Buddhist point of view. And sometimes we may have to tread a very careful path, so as to avoid both extremes. Probably we in the West, not only in America but probably in Europe too, we have to be very careful that we don't fall victim to a sort of pseudo-spiritual egalitarianism that quite consciously repudiates even the idea of spiritual hierarchy. But I think this is going to be a problem, at least a problem of presentation. And therefore we need to be very aware of it, and will present things, especially in our beginners classes, and very, very carefully and circumspectly. Because you mentioned a sort of duality of matter and spirit. Of course, perhaps it also can be pointed out, where appropriate, that in Buddhism there isn't any concept corresponding to that of matter in some forms of Western thought. We do have rupa, but it has been pointed out now for some time that rupa is not matter. I think Gunther does go into this quite extensively. Yes, I used to say, I think I've said it in the survey, that I was around that time, that Buddhism is methodologically dualistic, but it is not necessarily ontologically dualistic. You have to be methodologically dualistic, because there is something that you are trying to grow beyond. But I think also the point is worth making, that even though you may have to give up certain things which you consider lower or less important, you don't necessarily gain a higher level simply by giving up those things. Something more than that giving up is needed. Anyway.
But you said in answering the question that we can move up and down through different levels of consciousness. Is it taking what you said too literally to ask what is it that moves up and down?
Well, I suppose the answer is the same as, in principle, the same as that to the question of rebirth. Because instead of moving along on the horizontal, you move up the vertical. But the answer is in principle the same.
The answer is
in principle the same. Of course, you only move up and down within the mundane. Well, according to traditional Buddhist teaching. Once you penetrate into the transcendental, you don't come back, so to speak. Not taking that too literally. There is a point of irreversibility, which is, of course, stream entry. You don't come down into unskillful mental states. You can certainly come down into bodily awareness. I mean, the stream entrance bodily awareness is complete. In fact, it's better and clearer because unobscured by unskillful mental states. But the fact that he has gained stream entry doesn't mean he's unable to come down into bodily consciousness. What he is unable to come down into, using that terminology, is unskillful mental states.
Can I ask a question about rupa? I mean, can you think of rupa as being a sort of a kind of region of consciousness, rather than something in itself, but a kind of if you think of the whole range of consciousness, a certain part of it can be interpreted as form.
I suppose you could, though I wouldn't care to put it like that. I don't think it would make it very clear. But usually, it is said that rupa is that element which you encounter in your experience, which seems to be irreducibly not you. The object, as it were, which you cannot, reduce to your experience of yourself. I mean, for instance, I suppose I want you to do something, you won't do it. Well, so it shows that, you are not me, you're not a projection of my consciousness, because if you were, you'd presumably do whatever I wanted you to do. But there is something, in my experience that I cannot reduce to myself, to my own ideas, my emotions, my wishes. That is rupa. It's not so much form in the literal sense. Anyway, that's a big metaphysical question. So I think we'd better go on and try and get through all these questions.